The air on the 50th floor of Vanguard Nexus had a distinct scent, a sterile blend of floor polish, cold espresso, and the sharp tang of corporate anxiety. I had spent 18 years learning to navigate the invisible currents of leverage flowing through those glass hallways. As the Senior Director of Strategic Risk, my title sounded bloated to the uninitiated. But to those who actually understood how billions changed hands in the city, it meant I held the structural blueprints to the entire kingdom. My name is Elias Vance. I am 54 years old, and I do not raise my voice. I don't need to. My authority lives in the quiet scratch of a pen across a contract, the slight raise of an eyebrow, and my proprietary risk assessment algorithm. Over the last 11 months, I had painstakingly carved a masterpiece of corporate synergy out of a mountain of chaotic data, a $4 billion acquisition of Thorn Industries. It was a deal so complex it made standard mergers look like child's play. I was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window in my corner office, reviewing the final environmental liability clauses on my tablet. The door didn't just open, it was violently breached. Chloe, the 25-year-old daughter of our recently promoted executive vice president, marched into my office. Her heels struck the hardwood floor like a gavel. It was her very first day as the newly invented chief of staff, a position her father had undoubtedly carved out of the budget just for her. Armed with a freshly printed employee handbook from the late 90s, she wore a smirk suggesting she believed she was the main character of reality itself. "Excuse me." Her voice sliced through the low hum of the trading floor outside my glass walls. It was sharp and entitled. She wasn't looking at the view, she was looking at my midsection. I lowered my tablet slowly, turning to face her with practiced neutrality. "Can I help you, Chloe?" I asked, keeping my tone level. "I know exactly who you are, Elias," she interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "And I know what you think you're doing. Reviewing the compliance protocols for the Thorn merger I offered." "No," she sneered, stepping closer. The heavy scent of designer perfume assaulted my senses. "You are blatantly violating Code 4, Section B, regarding appropriate executive client-facing attire." I blinked. I was wearing an unstructured, charcoal gray tweed jacket paired with dark slacks, a crisp shirt, and my vintage leather satchel resting on the desk. It was the uniform of a man who solved billion-dollar problems. "The handbook clearly states standard issue worsted suits and neckwear only," she said, tapping the plastic cover. "And that bag? It looks like you pulled it out of a dumpster. We don't do distressed at Vanguard Nexus. We represent global excellence." The open-plan bullpen outside had suddenly gone tomb silent. The quantitative analysts stopped typing. Junior associates froze mid-stride. "Chloe," I said, dropping my voice an octave, "I am meeting with Donovan Thorne in 48 hours to finalize a $4 billion acquisition. My tweed jacket is not a structural risk. The issue here is that you are interrupting my final legal review." Her face flushed a patchy, angry red. She wasn't used to being told no. "I am the chief of staff," she announced. "I am enforcing corporate standards. If you can't follow the basic rules of this institution, how can we possibly trust you with its financial future?" She didn't care about the jacket. She wanted a scalp. She wanted to prove on minute one of day one that she was the apex predator. And taking down the veteran was the fastest way to terrify the pack. "Go home, change into a proper suit, and write a formal apology to HR," she commanded. I looked at her, seeing the slight tremor in her posture and the staggering ignorance of what my job actually entailed. "No," I said simply. "I have real work to do. Close the door on your way out." "You're fired," she shrieked. The words hung in the air, heavy and utterly ridiculous. I slowly turned back around. She was breathing heavily, eyes wide with adrenaline. She had actually pulled the trigger. "You cannot be serious," I said, analyzing a catastrophic malfunction in real time. "I am your superior by proxy, and you are blatantly insubordinate," she yelled. "Pack your things. I will have security escort you out right now." I looked past her at the terrified faces of my analysts pressed against the glass. Then, a strange clarity washed over my mind. I didn't feel panic. I felt overwhelming relief. "Okay," I said quietly. Chloe flinched, bracing for a screaming match. "Okay. You are absolutely right, Chloe," I said, snapping my tablet shut. "Standards are paramount. I will pack my personal belongings immediately." I didn't wait for her brain to catch up. She thought she had established total dominance. She had absolutely no idea she had just pulled the pin on a thermal grenade set to detonate in exactly 48 hours. She had just fired the only human being who understood the proprietary algorithms keeping Vanguard Nexus from a federal audit. My office was a carefully curated sanctuary. Unlike the sterile minimalism of the boardroom, my desk was an intricate landscape of dossiers and legal pads filled with mathematical shorthand. Chloe probably assumed everything of value was neatly digitized on the company cloud. She didn't understand that in high-stakes corporate acquisitions, the real leverage was built on proprietary intellectual property and personal handshakes. I didn't rush. Rushing implies guilt or panic. I opened my mahogany desk drawers with the methodical precision of a bomb disposal technician. First came the personal items, a framed photograph of my grandfather, and a crystal paperweight Donovan Thorne had personally given me after we closed a logistics deal years prior. Finally, I reached into the deepest drawer and pulled out a thick leather-bound binder. It contained the physical, signed copy of my software licensing agreement. Years ago, I had refused to sign over the intellectual property rights to the Vance Risk Matrix. Under 17 U.S.C. Section 106 of the Copyright Act, I retained exclusive rights to the algorithm, licensing it to Vanguard Nexus contingent upon my continued employment. By terminating me, Chloe had instantly revoked Vanguard Nexus's legal right to use the algorithm that underpinned the entire $4 billion Thorne Industries valuation. I dropped the leather binder into my distressed satchel with a heavy, deeply satisfying thud. I saw my executive assistant, Jenna, hovering in the doorway, her hands nervously twisting a tissue. "Elias," she whispered, "is it true? Did she actually just fire you?" "It's entirely true, Jenna," I said, keeping my voice soft. I picked up the preliminary due diligence packet for the Thorne merger, held it for a second, then set it back down, perfectly aligned in the absolute center of the desk. These were the official company copies. But the merger, Jenna stammered. The final meeting is in 48 hours. Nobody else knows the leverage ratios for the Montana sector. Nobody else understands how to parse the environmental appendix clauses. "I am completely sure that Chloe is very capable," I said, the lie tasting like perfectly aged bourbon. "She has a shiny new title and the employee handbook." I sat down at my terminal one last time. I didn't destroy company property. I simply ran a standard security protocol, logging out of the encrypted server and terminating the active session of the Vance Risk Matrix. Without my biometric authentication, the software would lock down into an impenetrable read-only archive. I put on my tweed jacket, picked up my satchel, and stepped out of my office. The entire floor was engaged in a desperate pantomime of productivity. The silence was deafening. The distinct silence of a crew watching the captain thrown overboard by a mutineer who couldn't read a compass. Chloe was waiting by the main elevator banks, arms crossed defensively, flanked by two uncomfortable-looking security guards. "Make sure he didn't take any proprietary data," Chloe snapped at them. Stan, the head of floor security, looked at me with deep, apologetic eyes. "He's clean, Miss Chloe," Stan mumbled, deliberately not reaching for my satchel. Chloe scoffed, "Fine, just get him out of here. I want this toxicity off my floor immediately." I pressed the down button and waited for the electronic ding. When the steel doors slid open, I turned to face Chloe. She braced for a curse or a shout. Instead, I gave her a genuine, warm smile. The kind of smile you give someone who unknowingly handed you a winning lottery ticket. "Thank you, Chloe," I said simply. Her brow furrowed in confusion. "What?" "For clarifying the true priorities of this organization," I said. "It has been incredibly illuminating. Good luck with the Thorne merger. The Montana environmental appendices are quite tricky without the matrix." "What matrix?" she demanded as the heavy doors began to close. "The digital drive has all the files." "Digital drives are so impersonal," I said softly. The doors slid shut, cutting off her face just as genuine panic started to creep into her eyes. As the elevator descended 50 floors, my spirits soared. By noon, the legal department would be asking pointed questions. By 2, the senior partners would be utterly confused. By tomorrow morning, the financial hemorrhage would officially begin. I walked out of the towering glass building into the bright sunshine. I didn't hail a cab. I walked to a quiet wood-paneled pub, ordered a neat scotch, and turned my phone off. I wanted to let them sit in the deafening silence of their own making. It wasn't until 6 in the evening, back in my apartment pouring a glass of heavy red wine, that I turned my phone back on. The device instantly buzzed like an angry hornet, lighting up with a relentless cascade of notifications. There were 18 missed calls from the office, 7 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, 34 urgent emails. I took a slow sip of my wine and scrolled through the text messages. Jenna, 11:30 a.m. Elias, the legal team just came down. They are asking who authorized your termination. Chloe is locked inside her father's office. Jenna, 12:45 p.m. The senior partners from Tokyo called. Chloe intercepted it. She told them you were no longer a cultural fit. There was a lot of screaming in Japanese. Jenna, 2:30 p.m. Where is the access key for the risk matrix? Chloe is screaming at the IT department. The system says the license has been revoked. Everyone is totally freaking out. I smiled. The Vance risk matrix wasn't just a spreadsheet. It was a proprietary engine. Without it, Vanguard Nexus couldn't legally verify the environmental safety of the Montana assets. Presenting unverified data in a $4 billion acquisition constituted gross negligence and rendered the valuation void ab initio. I opened an email from Harold, our general counsel. Urgent, employment status misunderstanding. Lias. There seems to have been a significant breakdown in communication. Please call me immediately. We need to reinstate your contract before the Thorn meeting. We can smooth this over. Let's not let emotions derail a historic merger. Emotions? I whispered. They always called it emotions when someone stood their ground against corporate nepotism. Another text came through from Richard, the chief financial officer. Richard, 7:15 p.m., Elias. Pick up the phone right now. Name your price. My price wasn't measured in company stock or a signing bonus. My price was basic professional dignity, a currency Vanguard Nexus had just violently devalued to absolute zero. I set the phone face down. The panic was distant, but I knew that by tomorrow morning the screaming would be deafening. There is a specific, heavy oak drawer in my study that remains perpetually locked. It doesn't contain jewelry or emergency cash. It contains pure leverage. I walked over to the antique writing desk, picked up a small brass key, and slid it into the lock. Inside, resting on a bed of faded velvet, was a single worn, leather-bound address book. Most people at Vanguard Nexus assumed I had been hired purely because of my impeccable resume. The truth was far more complicated. 4 years ago, when Donovan Thorne first considered letting outside capital touch his massive industrial empire, he had one non-negotiable condition. He demanded a liaison who understood the quiet, guarded wealth of legacy industries. I was that bridge, translating the cold capitalism of Vanguard Nexus into the language of industrial loyalty that Donovan respected. I opened the address book. Inside was a single, unlined sheet of paper with a direct private number to the encrypted satellite phone Donovan Thorne kept in his pocket. Calling this number was the absolute nuclear option. It breached multiple confidentiality clauses in my terminated contract, but I remembered Chloe's sneering face. I remembered the sheer arrogance with which she dismissed my 18 years of flawless service over the style of my jacket. I picked up my cell phone and dialed. This is Donovan. The voice was deep and commanding. It's Elias, I said calmly. There was a heavy pause. I thought we were in a strict quiet period until the final signing on Friday, Elias. We were, I replied, but the structural parameters of the deal have fundamentally changed. Changed how? The warmth drained from his voice, replaced by cold steel. I have been officially terminated by Vanguard Nexus, I said. The silence on the line was so absolute I thought the call had dropped. Terminated, Donovan repeated. By whom? Did the SEC find a discrepancy? No, I said smoothly. I was terminated by the executive vice president's brand new chief of staff, Chloe. She fired me over a dress code violation, specifically my tweed jacket and my satchel. A dress code violation, Donovan said flatly. Yes, I confirmed. And who exactly is handling the transition of the Montana environmental assets? Who is running the risk matrix? Nobody, I said. Chloe believes the raw data files on the company's server are sufficient. She is unaware that I revoked the licensing rights to the Vance risk matrix upon my termination. I heard a low rumbling sound over the phone. The raw files list the Montana property as non-revenue generating acreage with standard liabilities, Donovan said slowly. Without your algorithm to parse the subsurface environmental risks, The SEC will inevitably flag the asset for liquidation within 6 months. The valuation they are presenting is effectively fraudulent. It's legally void ab initio. That is correct, I said. Vanguard Nexus just fired the only person who knows where the legal landmines are buried, and they did it 48 hours before the biggest corporate merger in their history. Elias, Donovan said, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper. Are you currently free for a drink tomorrow morning? I am completely unemployed, Donovan. I am free all day. Excellent. Meet me at the Oak Room at 9 in the morning. And Elias? Do not sign anything they send you. Not a severance package, not a non-compete clause, nothing. Let them bleed. I wouldn't dream of it. I hung up the phone. My heart was pounding. I was no longer a wrongfully terminated employee. I was an active combatant in a corporate war. The next morning, the sky over the city was a bruised purple. I arrived at the Oak Room at exactly 8:45 a.m. Donovan Thorne was already there, nursing a black coffee. He looked immaculate in a tailored navy suit. They called my lead counsel this morning, Donovan said, buttering a piece of artisanal toast. Oh? I took a sip of the coffee. Yes, a young woman named Chloe. She explicitly told my legal team that you were entirely unavailable due to a sudden, severe medical emergency. She claimed you were currently hospitalized with extreme exhaustion, but had fully briefed her on the deal. I set my coffee cup down. The unadulterated audacity of the lie was breathtaking. If I was genuinely sick, the deal could theoretically be delayed. But because I was fired, the key man clause in the contract would trigger an automatic voiding of the exclusivity agreement. By lying, she was committing corporate fraud. She's desperately trying to buy time, I said. She honestly thinks if she can just get you in the room, she can charm her way through the Montana clauses. She thinks I'm an idiot, Donovan corrected. My assistant did a little digging. The Vanguard Nexus HR department is currently locked in a vicious standoff with Chloe. The CFO is reportedly throwing office supplies at the walls. Here is the reality of the situation, Elias. Donovan leaned forward. I absolutely do not do business with arrogant amateurs or blatant liars. The $4 billion deal with Vanguard Nexus is completely dead. But I still need to sell off specific assets, and I still want you to run the transition matrix. He pulled out a thick legal document. It wasn't a standard merger agreement. It was an executive consultancy contract. My private holding company is looking for a new global director of strategic acquisitions, Donovan said. The base salary is exactly double what you made, and your very first assignment is to dismantle Vanguard Nexus and acquire their prime assets for pennies on the dollar. It was freedom. It was immense power. It was the ultimate revenge. There's just one minor detail, Donovan added, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. I haven't canceled the final signing meeting at your old office yet. It's scheduled for tomorrow at 9. I want to personally see her face when she tries to explain why the hospitalized liaison is standing right in front of her. Do you want me to come to the boardroom? No. I want you to be waiting in the main lobby. I will handle the boardroom. You handle the exit. My phone buzzed on the table, a news alert, market rumors swirl, Vanguard Nexus 4B merger facing unexplained delays as key executive rumored to exit the leak had sprung. I accept the position, Donovan, I said, picking up the heavy gold pen. Good, he said. Now finish your coffee. You are going to need your strength. Later that afternoon, I walked past the imposing Vanguard Nexus building. I stayed on the opposite side of the bustling street, hidden behind oversized sunglasses. Even from a distance, I could see the frantic activity on the 50th floor through the glass walls. Shadowy figures paced rapidly back and forth under blazing fluorescent lights. I checked my personal email. There was one last desperate message from Chloe. Please call me. Elias, please pick up. We can fix this. My father is asking pointed questions. I need the password to the risk matrix. I deleted it without a second thought. There are no takebacks in the big leagues. You read the employee handbook, Chloe, but you forgot to read the room. The morning of the final meeting, a torrential downpour turned the city into a watercolor painting of gray steel. It perfectly matched the suffocating mood in the executive suite across the street. I sat in a high-end coffee shop directly opposite the main entrance of Vanguard Nexus. It was 8:30 a.m. I wasn't alone. Miles, Donovan Thorne's personal executive assistant, sat quietly across from me. We had a thick stack of Onboarding papers for my new role at Thorn Industries spread out on the table. Donovan is currently en route, Miles said smoothly. He asked me to ensure you were highly visible to the tower. I looked up. The lobby windows of Vanguard Nexus were crystal clear through the rain. There, pacing frantically near the security desk, was Chloe in a sharp white suit. She looked manic, yelling at a terrified receptionist, desperately trying to present the illusion of total control for Donovan's arrival. Then, she abruptly stopped pacing and looked out the window. Her gaze slowly drifted over to the coffee shop. Through the rain, I saw her physically freeze. She saw me. More importantly, she saw Miles sitting across from me. Everyone at Vanguard Nexus knew Miles was the harbinger of Donovan Thorn, and he was currently laughing and handing a pen to the man she had fired. Chloe pressed her hands against the cold glass in silent shock, grabbed her cell phone, and started dialing. My phone remained completely silent. I had permanently blocked her number. "She sees us," I said softly, taking a sip of coffee. "Excellent," Miles said without turning around. "Let her sweat. Panic makes people incredibly sloppy, Elias." I watched her crumble in real time. She aggressively pointed at us through the glass, likely screaming something unhinged about corporate espionage to the poor receptionist. Then she spun around, breaking into a dead sprint toward the elevators to warn someone. But what could she possibly say? It was a blatant admission of catastrophic failure. "She's running back upstairs," I reported. Miles nodded. "She's going to try to intercept the narrative before Donovan gets to the boardroom." "It's too late. The narrative left the building the moment you packed your satchel." Miles gathered the signed papers. "Welcome to Thorn Industries. Per Donovan's instructions, you are to wait here for 20 minutes, then enter the Vanguard Nexus lobby, and Donovan is pulling up right now." A sleek black town car glided to the curb. Donovan Thorn stepped out into the rain, buttoned his suit jacket, and walked straight through the revolving doors into the lion's den. I waited 10 minutes. Finally, I paid for the coffee, checked my reflection, and walked across the street. My tweed jacket looked perfect, my distressed satchel resting comfortably on my shoulder. The main lobby of Vanguard Nexus was designed to intimidate, featuring imported marble and a cascading indoor waterfall. I pushed through the revolving doors into the frigid air. The scene near the security desk played out like a tragic corporate play. Donovan Thorn stood dead center in the atrium, perfectly still. Chloe was there, highly disheveled, flanked by Richard, the CFO, and Harold, the general counsel, both looking like they wanted the floor to swallow them whole. I walked quietly across the vast expanse. My shoes clicked rhythmically on the marble. I stopped 20 feet away, close enough to hear every word. "Unforeseen medical complications," Chloe was saying shrilly. "But as I explicitly stated, Elias is unfortunately indisposed. He is currently in the ICU. Donovan stared down at her without blinking. "In the intensive care unit?" "Yes." Chloe nodded vigorously. "Very sudden exhaustion. But he briefed me fully before he collapsed." Donovan reached into his tailored pocket and pulled out his phone. "That is incredibly strange," he said in a low rumble, "because I just received a text from him 3 minutes ago. He says the dark roast coffee across the street was quite excellent." Chloe froze, the blood drained from her face. Richard's head snapped up violently. "What?" Richard croaked. Donovan turned slightly, his cold eyes landing directly on me. Chloe turned around. She saw me standing by the waterfall, perfectly healthy, holding my distressed satchel. The critically ill invalid. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a car. Chloe stammered, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He's lying! I fired him!" The absolute truth vomited out of her mouth. Richard turned on Chloe, his face turning a dangerous crimson. "You did what?" Donovan looked at Chloe with pure disgust. "You told my legal team he was critically ill. You blatantly lied to me, your board, and your partners. And you fired the primary project lead 48 hours before a $4 billion closing. For what, exactly?" "He violated the corporate dress code." Chloe shrieked, cornered like a rat. "His jacket, his bag." Donovan let out a harsh laugh. "You fired the sole architect of a $4 billion deal over a tweed jacket." He turned to Richard. "Is this the pathetic leadership I am buying?" "Mr. Thorne, please," Richard begged. "This is a massive misunderstanding. We can reinstate Elias right this second." Donovan raised a massive hand. "No." He turned to face me. "Elias, Are you currently employed by Vanguard Nexus? No, Mr. Thorne. My employment was formally terminated for cause. Then you have no legal authority to negotiate, Donovan said loudly. The Vanguard Nexus deal is dead. You can't do this. Chloe screamed. My father will sue you. Term sheets are contingent on due diligence, verified risk matrices, and basic good faith, Donovan said, colder than ice. You have demonstrated none of those. The heavy glass doors spun shut behind Donovan Thorne, and the lobby of Vanguard Nexus effectively exploded. The psychological blast wave that ripped through the Vanguard Nexus lobby was violent and destructive. Richard, the CFO who had survived 3 hostile corporate takeovers, turned on Chloe with a face the color of a bruised plum. You fired him? Richard roared, the harsh acoustics amplifying his rage. You fired the senior liaison without consulting the board? He was incredibly insubordinate. Chloe cried out, shrinking against the security desk. I am the executive vice president's chief of staff. You are a massive liability. Richard shouted, spittle flying. Do you have any earthly idea what you just did? That was $4 billion walking out the front door. The security guards suddenly found their shoes fascinating. The receptionist desperately pretended to type on dead keyboards. I simply stood by the waterfall, a calm observer to the corporate carnage I had engineered. Chloe looked around wildly for an ally. Her panicked eyes landed on me, filled with pure hatred and the terrifying realization that she had just dug her own professional grave. This is all your fault, she screamed, pointing a trembling finger. You planned this entire thing. I plan to wear a tweed jacket to work, I said calmly. You meticulously planned the rest, Chloe. Richard spun toward me, his face transforming from rage to pure desperation. Elias, please, ignore her. She is officially suspended, effective immediately. He glared back at Chloe. Get out of my sight. Go up to your father's office. Do not speak to anyone. If you tweet or send an email, I will personally sue you for breach of fiduciary duty. Chloe let out an jagged sob and ran awkwardly toward the elevators. Richard took a deep, shuddering breath, turning a pleading smile toward me. Okay, Elias, the damage is bad, but it isn't irreversible. We will tell Donovan the situation is fixed. You are officially rehired, a 30% raise and massive stock options. Just fix this for us. I looked closely at Richard. In nearly 2 decades, he had never once said thank you when I saved a quarter's earnings. He only cared now because his ship was taking on water. I can't do that, Richard, I said plainly. Why not? Name your number. It's really not about the money. I reached into my distressed leather satchel and pulled out a heavy, cream-colored envelope. What is that? Richard asked, trembling. It is my formal acknowledgement of termination, I lied smoothly. It was actually the executed onboarding packet for Thorne Industries. You can't rehire me, Richard. Why not? He pleaded. Because I have already accepted a new position. Richard's face went completely slack. Who could possibly hire you this fast? The client, I said softly. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back. You are working for Thorne Industries? As of 9 o'clock this morning, I am their new global director of strategic acquisitions. If Vanguard Nexus wants to salvage any tiny part of this broken deal, you will be directly negotiating with me. But not today. Today, I am going to go buy a new tweed jacket. I turned my back on the terrified CFO and walked slowly toward the revolving doors. Behind me, I could hear Richard frantically shouting into his cell phone, but nobody was going to answer. The line was dead. 3 days later, the stock of Vanguard Nexus plummeted a catastrophic 22%. The financial rumor mill churned out devastating stories about fraudulent valuations and a total collapse of executive leadership. In a desperate bid to stop the bleeding, the board literally begged Donovan Thorne for one final meeting, promising the deal could be favorably restructured. Donovan agreed on one condition: the entire executive board, including the executive vice president and his daughter, had to be present. The boardroom on the 50th floor was absolutely packed. Every single executive was sweating profusely. Chloe sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, looking incredibly small in a drab gray dress. Her father stared fiercely at the table, refusing to look at her. The heavy double doors opened. Donovan walked in, radiating power, followed by Miles, and then me. I wore a brand new dark navy jacket with subtle brass buttons. A collective gasp went around the room. Chloe's eyes went wide with sheer terror. We firmly believe, the CEO began, his voice shaking, that this meeting was convened to discuss the reinstatement of the Thorn merger. Donovan sat down heavily at the head of the table. I am not here to merge, Donovan stated flatly. I am here to make a hostile offer for your remaining assets at precisely 30 cents on the dollar. 30 cents? Richard shouted, leaping to his feet. We were valued at $4 billion. That was the valuation when you had competent risk leadership, Donovan said calmly. That was the price when you had Elias running the Matrix. Now you just have chaos. He gestured casually toward me. Elias tells me that without the Vance algorithm managing the Montana transition, your environmental risk profile is catastrophic. Your valuation is legally void ab initio. Every head in the room slowly turned to look at me. The deep betrayal in their eyes was palpable. They expected blind loyalty from the person they had so casually discarded. Elias, Chloe whispered, her voice cracking. How could you do this? You worked here for 18 years. I looked directly at her. I didn't feel hate anymore. I just felt pity. She was a careless child playing with matches who was genuinely surprised when the house burned down. I did, I said, and for 18 years I played the game perfectly, and you arbitrarily decided that wasn't enough. The EVP suddenly spoke up, desperate. We can easily fix this. Elias, please come back. We will fire Chloe right now. We will give you her job and a board seat. The entire room held its breath. This was the ultimate offer of corporate redemption. I looked over at Donovan. He raised a single eyebrow, waiting. Are you ready to sign the paper, Elias? He asked, playing along perfectly. I looked at the sweating CEO, at Richard, and finally at Chloe. I smiled the calm, terrifying smile of a man holding the shovel. I'm sorry, I said softly, my voice echoing in the silent room. She fired me, no deal. Donovan stood up instantly. You heard the man. The final offer is 30 cents on the dollar. You have exactly until 5 o'clock to accept, or we buy it at the bankruptcy auction next month for 10. He turned and walked out the door. I followed right behind him. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. The absolute crushing silence said everything. As we walked toward the executive elevator, Donovan handed me a thick file. Good work today, Director, he said. I took the file, feeling its weight. Thank you, Donovan. The elevator doors opened. I stepped in, and for the first time in 18 years, I didn't check my reflection to see if my jacket was perfectly straight. I already knew it was flawless. We rode down to the lobby, leaving the smoking wreckage of an empire behind, and I finally exhaled.